Hello, I'm Brabazon. I'm the Dean of Graduate Research and the Professor of Cultural Studies at Flinders University. And I'm sitting with Professor Steve Redhead, who is also the Professor of Cultural Studies. He believes he is the senior one. That's a whole other conversation that we'll have at another time. But today we're going to talk about a book, particularly a paperback book. And this tremendous book is titled Football and Accelerated Culture. We're going to talk about that title and this book. Its hardback and e-book was published, I think, 18 months ago, and the paperback has just arrived in the last week. So I thought it was a good opportunity to talk about this book that has clearly been successful in terms of sales, but will, I think, find a new audience through its paperback. So Steve, hi.
Hi.
And talk me through this book a little bit if you can. You must be thrilled that it's paperback because that's rare these days. But talk me through the phrase that you use quite a lot and is very important to that book. Talk about accelerated culture.
Yes, accelerated culture is a concept that I sort of tentatively developed in a book in 2004 called Paul Virilio, Theories for an Accelerated Culture. And the idea of accelerated culture certainly is connected to the speed of technology, which Paul Virilio was very and is very interested in. But it was also trying to start a shift in explaining capitalism, global capitalism, not just the digital, although I think that's quite important. I think that what I've tried to do in the last 3 books, actually, We Have Never Been Postmodern, Theory at the Speed of Light, Football and Accelerated Culture, This Modern Sporting Life, and my new book, Theoretical Time, so it is a kind of trilogy in the last few years.
Interesting.
Is to try and add concepts to that idea of accelerated culture. And in some ways, Football and Accelerated Culture is about the application of concepts and theories that I developed in We Have Never Been Postmodern to the area of the football industry globally, in which I've done a lot of empirical research. And Theoretical Times, which is a new book which comes out in November, is really the third in that series about re-energising theory. And I think this particular book, the paperback book, Football and Accelerated Culture, will help in the development of that trilogy.
Now, I think this is quite significant and quite important because Steve has done throughout his career smashed together very innovative ideas that perhaps wouldn't have come together if you hadn't done this work. And one great example is why football is so significant to this story. So what is the role of football, particularly, we're talking soccer football, but we can talk other codes as well, in this accelerated culture, and how does it manage the local, how does it manage the global, and also the proliferating media environment that I would argue links the two?
Yes, I think the idea of football as the global game and football as part of working class culture and the history of working class culture are the two things that are key there.
Right.
So even in the last few years, in the years of accelerated culture, you've got clearly the idea of modern football, which is, commercialised, commodified, globalised, stylised. And
in a connotative sense.
Yes, and you've also got the idea of anti-modern football. And anti-modern football is of all sorts of stripes, but the idea that you're against the commodification of the global game, which was at one time a working class game historically, is part of the story. And I would push that even further to say that you've got a dialectical game. You've got modern football, you've got anti-modern football, and you've got the third part of this, which is something in the future.
Right, and so basically this globalised football is critiquing, if you will, Manchester United, critiquing Chelsea and what those enormous teams really mean internationally in terms of the domination of the game.
Yeah, that's right. And also the idea of the dialectic, which I think is coming back, interestingly anyway, is giving some succour to those who would want to change this, monster basically, which is now globalised through the media and through companies like Murdoch's. You've got a really interesting set of academic pieces now which are being written against, if you like, homophobia in football, sexism in football, yes, commodification in football. And actually the Routledge series that this book is out in, the Routledge book series on research in football culture,
yes,
in sport and culture and society, is actually one of the series that has those sorts of critiques in. So yes, I think that's really interesting.
Look, it is, and what also I think makes this book interesting and different and distinctive, even for people who are not, interested in football, yeah, studies as such. What is, yeah, interesting about this book is, if you're interested in football studies and how we think about it, it's terrific. Where it is interesting though is you spend a lot of time working with and through Virilio and Baudrillard, yes, in particular.
Yes.
So what is the value of high theory and high theorists to low culture, and particularly popular culture? So what does that combination intellectually give you?
Yes, I think one of the reviews of the book for Routledge, which was actually done by Steve Hall, Professor of Criminology at Teesside University, who I've got the greatest respect for.
Great guy.
In one of the sentences in which he reviewed this book, he actually talked about the book being high theory and raw realism. And I'm really, really proud of that. Yeah. I think the idea that we can re-energise disciplines and sub-disciplines through new theory is really important, and high theory at that. But also I think you have to combine that with what Steve actually describes about my book as raw realism. So I think the combination of those two things is really important, and you're right that certainly theorists like Baudrillard, Virilio, Alain Badiou, Charles Zizek, who I concentrate again on in the new book Theoretical Times,
yes,
are theorists, I think, who break with what I used to call really cosmopolitan sociology.
Indeed.
Which didn't predict the global financial crash and didn't predict the sorts of things that have developed in the new right over the last decade.
And the consequences of anti-statism too.
Absolutely. So yeah, there had to be something new, and I call that, in We've Never Been Postmodern, claustropolitan sociology and bunker anthropology, slightly ironically.
Yeah.
But I was trying to push new theory forward, and I think even in the time since that book was published, We've Never Been Postmodern was published in 2011, this change is coming. There is a change coming in theoretical work, in the politics of theory, in all sorts of disciplines. And I think the idea of developing this in football studies is really interesting.
Look, I agree, and also what I'm really impressed with, and I suppose we made this decision 5 or 6 years ago, I think, to make a stand for theory. Because I think as we've moved internationally around the academy, there's been so much anti-theoretical work. As we've often talked about, in a PhD, there is a theory chapter.
Yep.
So what does that make the rest of the PhD?
Yep.
But the notion that theory is something that's not real, theory is something that's not important, that's only enabling for the actual research.
Yes.
And so actually making a stand for high, complex, difficult discussions, I think we really need that at the moment. And if we don't have that, if we slot back into empiricism and positivism without critique, I think we're seeing the consequences of that now in the current political environment.
Yeah,
really.
And I think you can actually take the 4 theories that I talked about before and that are in the book, and say that these people have developed mature theory for 50 years. In case Baudrillard is dead, but there's certainly 50 years of work there.
Yeah.
So you can talk about Baudrillard studies and Virilio studies, Zizek studies, Badiou studies, and so on, in a way which you couldn't do before. So this isn't, surface. This is deep, mature theoretical work which you can now study in a singular way and combine with empirical work in a quite innovative form, I think.
Yeah, so it's not like it's 1987 and you're dealing with Lyotard.
Absolutely.
And that's the key theorist that we sort of plug into all series of problems.
Yeah.
I think we've got maturity.
We've changed completely in that.
And I'm going to now ask a disciplinary question, if I can. It's very important to both of us. This book, I think, and I read it again, I think it's my third read, the paperback's a very interesting way to engage with these ideas, but you are, I think, in that book, trying to build a new and productive relationship between cultural studies and leisure studies.
Yes.
Have I misread that? Did you intend to do that?
No, I think I was certainly trying to do that. I think certainly in the publicity for the book, Routledge talked about the disciplinary area as physical cultural studies, and we've talked about in podcasts and podcasts quite a bit about the change in labelling of something like the sociology of sport,
yes,
which Football Outside of the Culture, This Modern Sporting Life would have been in the past. So physical culture studies, even in the last 18 months since the hardback book came out,
yes,
partly through its Routledge Handbook of Physical Cultural Studies, which you contributed to, you did an afterword for.
What a pleasure, yeah.
And that has already shifted the labelling
Yes.
of this field. So I think in some ways what I was talking about in the book as cultural studies and leisure studies has almost been superseded by the term physical cultural studies and the really interesting edgy work that's going on in that area.
I agree. I think David McGillivray, a great
Yes,
colleague of ours,
absolutely.
big hi to David, is also doing some fascinating work re-theorising leisure studies in
Yes.
terms of event management,
Very much so.
urban regional development. He's doing some great work
Yep.
that I think is working in a different place to yours, but I
Yes.
think in the next few years there may be some connectors
Yes.
between you both, and you're both reading each other too.
Yes.
So I think some nice relationships will be
I
formed
think
there.
so, and I think that's one of the interesting things that, you know, for work to be developed, when, you know, and these are hard intellectual times, I think the way in which people use the different subdisciplines and the boundaries and try and push through them is one way of actually collaborating globally.
Yes.
And I think there's some really interesting work in what you might call, I've called digital leisure studies or physical culture studies. So culture studies and leisure studies are being reformed.
Yeah, I agree. I think lots of really powerful things are going to happen in that space. I want to draw you to the catastrophic, and it certainly feels like we're living in catastrophic times, and the last 18 months I think it's got worse.
Yeah.
You do talk about sporting claustropolis, so that's a great phrase. What do you mean by it, and is it intensifying in a Brexit-Trump environment?
Yes, I think it definitely is. I think one of the concepts that I tried to develop in this trilogy of books is claustropolitanism,
Yeah.
which is my phrase really for a way of reading some of Paul Virilio's work, where he talked about the fact that, in his view, we were moving from cosmopolis to claustropolis.
Yes.
And my idea of claustropolitanism was really trying to suggest that there was a new, as Raymond Williams once put it, structure of feeling. That
Lovely.
claustropolitanism, to put it briefly, is that the way in which we all want to get off the planet. You know, some days I think it's just me, but I think it's a global post-crash condition. And I think that has certainly been picked up in all sorts of disciplines and interdisciplinary work. But the idea of sporting claustropolis, particularly in football outside of culture, it is actually a chapter, and it was looking at the way in which events like the World Cup or the Olympics were at one stage part of the regeneration of the city.
Of course.
You know, you go back 30 years or so, that's how the Olympics or the Commonwealth Games or World Cups were put.
Barcelona is a great
absolutely,
place,
yes, in the 90s. So, but if you actually look now, even in the period since the hardback came out, you've had the Olympics in Rio, for example, and look at that, didn't that go well? If you look at the Maracanã Stadium, the great soccer stadium in Rio, that's now been handed back to the local authorities by the Olympic authorities, and it was used for the Olympics and is now a total mess.
Wow.
But in fact, I think that had been coming for quite a while, and what I was trying to do was to show how catastrophe in sporting events, and particularly global sporting events, and all that went with that, has actually been developing for quite a while. And that shows the way in which society is changing, and of course the big change now is to the new right Brexit, Trump, Hanson in Australia. All of that suggests a rise of the right, which we now have to fight again. It's interesting how for decades the decline of the left has allowed the rise of the right. And I think there are certainly things in football accelerated culture which point to that sort of thing, but I was writing before Brexit, before Trump.
And Theoretical Times, your new book, is clearly grasping at this time much more overtly.
Yes, and it does try to bend theory into that.
Powerful. Last question, and it is about Brexit and Trump, I think, what I'm sort of calling the shop of international racist horrors. What's going to happen to football post-Trump, post-Brexit? So in xenophobic, racist, brittle, nasty times, how will football be impacted?
Well, I think it's always been an arena of struggle. So you can compare the working class game to what was called the people's game to the globalised, commodified thing that we have now. But I think what we have to do is to be on our toes. We have to be anti-racist, anti-homophobic, and so on in our practices and our, certainly as academics, we have to be incredibly watchful, because the dangers of those things in these particular times in Trump land are going to be, on the agenda again. There's no doubt about that. I don't think there's anything inevitable and inexorable about that. I think it is an arena of struggle, but I think we have to be incredibly watchful and to try and preserve what's good about these sorts of industries.
Yeah, and also, make commitments to the anti-sexist, anti-racist forces. So commit strongly to women's football, many codes, and support it and write about it and understand it and interpret it in and of its own terms. Understand the multiple localisms of football, so commit to the local, and commit to working class politics, ensuring that working class sportsmen, indeed all sportsmen, but working class sportsmen get a proper pay, pay deal, which was your master's and your PhD.
Absolutely,
really.
PhD was,
So it is about committing to the political economy of sport and committing to that social struggle.
That's right, and I think if people want to look at the series that this paperback book is in, the Routledge Research in Sport, Culture and Society, you'll find books in all of those areas. That's the point. Yes,
and that's powerful. So this book is terrific. As you said, it's part of a trilogy. It's been a very successful decade and a half for you, really. It's a whole very innovative palette of your scholarship working in and around high theory and complex interpretations like this. So Steve, congratulations on the paperback, which is incredibly rare these days, and you've got it. And again, for all our guys and girls out there who are watching this video, it's going to be put up on Steve's YouTube channel, probably mine as well. We'd love to talk with you about it, so please contact us there or via our email address at Flinders University. Congratulations, Steve.
Thank you.